Hello, my name is William, and welcome to Dragon X Dominion, a realm where dragon legends are forged in fire, honor, and forgotten worlds. I will be your narrator and guide through these epic lands. If you crave powerful stories, legendary dragons, and wars that echo through eternity, then you found your home, ladies and gentlemen. So subscribe, and claim your place among these legends.
The escape pod hit the ground so hard that Claire's teeth rattled. Metal screamed against rock, then everything went silent except for the hissing of broken coolant lines. She lay there for a moment, checking if anything felt broken. Her left shoulder hurt, but it moved. Good enough. The main ship was gone. 17 crew members, all dead in the explosion. Claire had been in the research bay when the reactor failed, closest to the emergency pods. She was the lucky one, if you could call crash landing on an unknown planet lucky. She kicked the door release 3 times before it finally gave way. The air that rushed in was hot and dry, tasting of sulfur and something else she could not identify. Her scanner was cracked but still working. Breathable atmosphere, high gravity, temperature about 40 degrees. She had survived worse during her fieldwork on Venus. The landscape looked like someone had taken Earth's desert and mountains and smashed them together. Red rocks jutted up like broken teeth. In the distance, she could see what looked like structures, but they were massive, built for creatures much larger than humans. Claire grabbed her emergency pack and started walking. The sun was setting, and she needed shelter before dark. She had no idea what lived on this planet, and she did not want to find out while stumbling around in the darkness. After an hour of hiking, she found a cave entrance carved into a cliff face. But this was not a natural cave. The entrance had been shaped, smoothed. Symbols were carved into the stone, but she could not read them. Her translator device was on the ship, now debris floating in space. The cave went deeper than she expected. The air inside was warmer and she could hear something. A sound like breathing, but bigger, much bigger. She almost turned back. Then she heard something else. A smaller sound, weak and high-pitched. It reminded her of baby birds back on Earth calling for food. Claire moved forward carefully, using her flashlight to navigate. The tunnel opened into a huge chamber. Her light reflected off something that looked like gold, but it was not treasure. It was scales. 3 creatures lay huddled together in what looked like a nest made of precious metals and soft materials. They were roughly the size of large dogs, covered in scales that shifted from deep red to gold. They had wings folded against their bodies, long necks, and faces that looked reptilian, but also something more. Their eyes were large and intelligent, watching her with a mix of fear and desperate hope. Dragons, or something very close to what humans would call dragons. The smallest one made that crying sound again. It was shivering despite the warm air. Claire's scientist brain immediately started making observations. Young creatures separated from parents, showing signs of distress and possible malnutrition. The nest was clean but cold, as if no one had tended it recently. Her human brain said something simpler. These babies needed help. She approached slowly, hands out, making soft sounds like she used to do with frightened animals during her research. The largest of the 3 hissed, trying to look threatening, but its wings were shaking. Claire sat down outside the nest and opened her pack. She had emergency rations, thermal blankets, and a basic medical kit. Not much, but something. She broke off a piece of protein bar and held it out. The dragons stared at it, then at her. The smallest one took a tentative step forward, sniffing. It grabbed the food with a small clawed hand and ate it quickly. The other 2 watched their sibling not die from the strange food, then came forward as well. Soon all 3 were eating from her hands. Claire wrapped the thermal blanket around the smallest one. It made a sound almost like a purr and pressed against her leg. She found herself smiling despite the situation. She was stranded on an alien planet, but at least she was not alone. She began to hum an old song her mother used to sing, something about stars and sailing ships. The dragons tilted their heads, listening. Their eyes began to droop. That was when she heard the footsteps, heavy, deliberate, making the ground vibrate with each impact. Something enormous entered the chamber. Clare looked up and up and up. The creature that stood in the entrance was easily 15 feet tall, covered in scales that looked like they could turn away bullets. Its eyes glowed with an inner fire, and when it opened its mouth, she could see teeth designed to tear apart anything unfortunate enough to be prey. This was an adult dragon, and judging by the way it was looking at her, she had made a terrible mistake. The dragon roared, a sound so loud that dust fell from the ceiling. The three babies immediately ran to hide behind Clare, which did not help her situation at all. She stood up slowly, keeping her hands visible. No weapons, no threat, just a small human who had stumbled into something far beyond her understanding. The dragon took a step forward, and Clare realized that she was probably going to die on this planet after all, just not from starvation or exposure. The smallest baby grabbed onto her leg and would not let go. The dragon stopped, its glowing eyes narrowing as it looked at its children clinging to the strange alien creature. Hrothgar had returned from the border expecting to find his children weak but alive. Instead, he found a tiny alien creature singing to them in his dead mate's nest. His first instinct was to kill the intruder. His second instinct was the same. But then his youngest daughter, barely 3 months old, wrapped herself around the creature's leg and refused to move. His son stood between the alien and him, wings spread in a protective stance he had never seen them use before. In the 6 weeks since their mother had fallen in battle, his children had been dying slowly. They refused to eat, refused the care of the royal attendants, refused everything. The healers said it was grief, that hatchlings sometimes followed their mothers into death. Now they looked healthier than they had in weeks. Their scales had regained some shine, their eyes were bright, and they were protecting this tiny soft thing that barely came up to his knee. The creature spoke sounds that meant nothing to him, but the tone was calm, gentle. It held up its small hands, showing no weapons. Hrothgar could crush it with one hand, and it knew this, yet it did not run. His daughter made a small chirping sound, one he had not heard since her mother died. She looked up at the alien with complete trust. Hrothgar made a decision that would probably cost him his throne. He stepped back and sat down, making himself smaller, less threatening. The alien seemed to understand this and relaxed slightly. Over the next hour, Hrothgar watched the creature interact with his children. It wrapped them in some kind of shiny material that held heat. It gave them food from a strange pack. But more importantly, it touched them gently, made soft sounds, and treated them with a tenderness that dragon culture had forgotten centuries ago. Dragons were warriors. Dragon hatchlings were trained to be strong from birth. Coddling was considered weakness, yet his children were thriving under this alien's gentle care in a way they had not under proper dragon rearing. The creature started making rhythmic sounds again, that singing noise. His children curled up against it and fell asleep within minutes. Hrothgar had not seen them sleep peacefully in weeks. He needed to bring this situation before the council. By law, any unauthorized being in the royal nesting grounds could be executed. But by tradition, anyone who saved royal children was owed a debt of honor. These two facts were about to collide in a way that would shake his kingdom. Hrothgar made a low rumbling sound. The alien looked at him, and he saw intelligence in those strange eyes. He gestured toward the tunnel. The creature seemed to understand. It gently moved his sleeping children into their nest, covering them with the shiny material, then followed him. The walk through the palace was long. Dragons they passed stopped and stared. News would spread quickly. By the time they reached the council chamber, half the kingdom would know the king had brought an alien to the throne room. The council members were already assembled when they arrived, 12 of the oldest and most powerful dragons in the kingdom. They took one look at the tiny creature next to Hrothgar and began shouting. An alien in the sacred nesting grounds. Kill it immediately. This is an outrage against tradition. Hrothgar let them shout until they ran out of air. Then he spoke in the voice that had commanded armies. This creature saved my children. I found them healthy and content for the first time since their mother's death. Explain to me why I should kill the being who succeeded where all of you failed. The chamber went silent. Elder Grimscale, the oldest member of the council, stepped forward. His scales were nearly black with age, and he had advised 3 kings before Hrothgar. What you describe is impossible. A soft alien could not provide what trained dragon attendants could not. Come and see for yourself, Hrothgar said. They did. The entire council followed him back to the nesting chamber. His children were still asleep, peaceful and warm. The youngest woke when she heard movement and immediately looked around for the alien. When she saw it among the crowd, she chirped happily and scrambled over to press against its legs. The council watched in shocked silence as all 3 hatchlings surrounded the creature, competing for its attention. The alien made gentle sounds and touched each of them, and the hatchlings responded with obvious joy. "What manner of sorcery is this?" Grimskill whispered. The alien seemed to sense the tension. It pointed to itself and made a sound, "Clare." Then it pointed to the hatchlings and made a questioning gesture. Hrothgar understood. It was trying to communicate, asking about his children. He spoke their names. Sira, Doran, Tessa. The alien, Clare, repeated the names carefully, then spoke to each hatchling using their name. They responded immediately, showing that they had learned to recognize their names from this creature in just a few hours. "It taught them their names," one council member said in disbelief. "In one day it accomplished what our trainers could not do in weeks." Grimscale looked at Hrothgar. "This is unprecedented. I do not know what to make of it." "Then we investigate," Hrothgar said. "Clare will remain as temporary caretaker while we study these human methods. If they prove effective, we will discuss the implications. If not, we will revisit the question of trespassing." "Temporary?" Grimskill's eyes narrowed. "You realize the hatchlings are already bonded. Separation could damage them psychologically." "Then we will deal with that when the time comes," Hrothgar said, though his heart was heavy. He had seen how his children looked at Clare. They looked at her the way they used to look at their mother. The council agreed reluctantly. Clare would stay under guard and teach them these human methods of child-rearing. But there were conditions. She would be watched constantly. Any sign of deception or harm would result in immediate execution, and she would have to prove that human methods were superior to dragon tradition. It was a temporary solution to an impossible problem. But as Hrothgar watched Clare gently guide his children back to sleep, he wondered if perhaps humans had learned something on their harsh world that dragons had forgotten in their pursuit of strength. Clare woke to find a dragon the size of a house staring at her. After 3 days in the palace, she was almost getting used to it. Almost. The dragon, whose name sounded like grinding rocks when Hrothgar said it, was apparently the head of education for young dragons. He had been watching Clare work with the children for hours, taking notes on a tablet that looked comically small in his massive claws. Clare had learned some things about dragon society. They valued strength above everything. Children were trained, not raised. Affection was considered a weakness that left you vulnerable to enemies. Parents kept emotional distance from their offspring to prepare them for the harsh reality of a warrior culture. It explained why the 3 babies had been so desperate for basic warmth and comfort. She had also learned that Sira, Doran, and Tessa were not just any children. They were royalty. Their father was the Dragon King. Their mother had been a legendary warrior who died fighting some kind of invasion force. The entire kingdom was watching to see how the king's children would be raised, because it would set the standard for the next generation. "No pressure. Explain again why you waste time with this," the education chief said, pointing at Clare showing Tessa how to stack blocks made of some crystalline material. "It is not a waste," Clare said slowly. Her translator had finally been replaced with a device that let dragons understand her words. "Play teaches problem-solving, spatial awareness, and creativity. On Earth, young mammals and birds learn critical survival skills through play." "We are neither mammals nor birds," he said dismissively. "No, but learning principles are universal among intelligent species." Clare watched as Tessa successfully built a tower 5 blocks high, then looked at Clare for approval. Clare smiled and nodded, and Tessa's scales actually changed color slightly, showing pleasure. The education chief made a note. The color change? I have not seen hatchlings do that in response to simple acknowledgement. Because no one has been giving them acknowledgement, Clare said, trying to keep the frustration from her voice. Positive reinforcement is a basic teaching tool. When you reward behavior you want to see repeated, the behavior increases. Doran brought over a tablet showing a basic math problem he had solved. Clare praised him, and he immediately went to find a harder problem. Sira, watching this, brought over her own completed work. They are competing for your attention, the chief observed. Yes, that is healthy. It motivates them to learn faster and better. Clare helped Sira with a question she had gotten stuck on, breaking the problem into smaller steps. On Earth, human children learn faster when they have emotional bonds with their teachers. The desire to please someone they care about is a powerful motivator. We teach dragons to be strong, not to please others. Clare looked at him directly. Humans survived on the harshest planet in our region of space. Extreme weather, dangerous predators, diseases that could wipe out entire populations. We did not survive because we were the strongest. We survived because we worked together, because we cared about each other. That is not weakness. That is the ultimate survival strategy. The chief was quiet for a long moment. Then he pointed at Tessa, who had gotten frustrated with a puzzle and thrown it across the room. How do you handle that? We would punish such displays of temper. Clare walked over to Tessa and sat down next to her. Frustrated? She asked gently. Tessa nodded, looking ashamed. That is okay. This puzzle is hard. Let us try a different approach. She showed Tessa how to look at the puzzle from a different angle. Within minutes, Tessa had solved it. Her scales brightened again with pride. You did not punish the outburst, the chief said. I addressed the cause of the outburst, Clare explained. She was not being bad. She was struggling and did not know how to ask for help. Punishment would have taught her to hide her struggles. Helping her taught her that asking for help is okay. Over the next week, more dragons came to observe. Some were skeptical. Many were openly hostile. But they all watched as the 3 royal children flourished under Clare's care. The children's vocabulary increased daily. They were learning faster than dragon children typically did. They were also developing emotional intelligence that dragon children usually did not show until much older. Sira, the oldest at 6 months, started helping her younger siblings without being asked. Doran began solving problems creatively instead of just using brute force. Tessa, the youngest and smallest, gained confidence and started speaking up instead of hiding. But not everyone was pleased with the progress. A group of traditionalist nobles began meeting in secret. They saw Clare's methods as corruption, softening the next generation of dragons. The king's children should be warriors, not these gentle creatures who played with blocks and asked questions. One evening, after Clare had put the children to bed with a story about Earth's oceans, Hrothgar came to speak with her. His massive form filled the doorway. The council will convene tomorrow, he said, his voice like distant thunder. They will decide whether your methods are acceptable or whether tradition must be upheld. Clare felt her stomach drop, and if they choose tradition, then you will be sent away, and my children will be raised as dragons have always been raised. He paused. They will not understand why you left. They have already lost one mother. The weight of that statement hung in the air. Clare looked at the 3 sleeping forms curled together in their nest. In just 2 weeks, she had grown to love them as if they were her own. What do you think will happen? She asked quietly. Hrothgar was silent for a long time. I think tomorrow will determine not just your fate, but the future of my entire kingdom. There are those who see the value in what you have taught, but there are more who fear change. He turned to leave, then stopped. For what it is worth, you have given my children something I could not. You have given them joy. Whatever happens tomorrow, I am grateful for that. After he left, Clare sat watching the children sleep. Tomorrow she would have to prove that human methods of raising children were not just different, but better. She would have to convince a council of ancient dragons that love was not weakness, but strength. And she would have to do it knowing that if she failed, these three children would grow up believing that affection was something to be ashamed of. The council chamber was designed to intimidate. Massive pillars carved from single pieces of black stone rose to a ceiling so high it disappeared in shadow. 12 dragon elders sat in a semicircle, each one powerful enough to level a city. And in the center, looking very small and very human, stood Clare. "State your case," Grimskull commanded. Clare took a breath. "You asked me to prove that human methods work. I have data from 2 weeks of observation." She activated the holographic display they had given her. Syrah, Doran, and Tessa have all exceeded normal developmental milestones for their age group. Charts appeared in the air. Learning speed, emotional regulation, problem-solving abilities. In every category, the 3 royal children were performing above average. "This proves nothing," one of the traditionalist elders said. "They are royal blood, of course they excel." "Then compare them to their own baseline from before I arrived," Clare said. New charts appeared showing the dramatic improvement. They were failing to thrive under traditional methods. Under human methods, they are flourishing. "You have made them weak," another elder said. "Soft, dependent on affection and praise." "No," Clare said firmly. "I have made them resilient. On Earth, we learned that emotional strength is the foundation for all other kinds of strength. A child who knows they are valued, who has secure attachments, who understands their own emotions, that child becomes an adult who can face any challenge." "Pretty words," Grimskull said, "but we need proof, not theories from your soft human world." Clare had expected this. "Then let me show you. Bring me other dragon hatchlings the same age as the royal children. Raise half with traditional methods, half with human methods. Compare the results." The council murmured among themselves. Finally, Grimskull nodded. "Agreed, but there will be conditions." The demonstration was set for 1 week later. 6 hatchlings from noble families, all around 6 months old. 3 would be raised traditionally by dragon attendants. 3 would be taught by Clare using human methods. The tasks would test everything: learning ability, emotional control, problem-solving, and social cooperation. Clare threw herself into the work. She had 1 week to teach 3 baby dragons what human children learned over years. She focused on the basics: emotional recognition, asking for help, working together, thinking creatively. The traditionalist dragons trained their 3 hatchlings with the old methods: strict discipline, harsh corrections, isolation to build self-reliance. No coddling, no praise, no emotional attachment. Hrothgar watched both groups carefully. Clare could see the conflict in his eyes. He wanted to believe her way was better, but centuries of tradition told him otherwise. On the day of the demonstration, the entire court assembled. The first test was individual learning. Each hatchling was given a complex puzzle that required both physical manipulation and logical thinking. The traditionally raised hatchlings approached it with determination. They used brute force, trying to make pieces fit through strength alone. When that failed, they became frustrated. One gave up entirely. The other 2 eventually solved it through trial and error, taking nearly an hour each. Clare's students approached it differently. They examined the puzzle first, talked through possible solutions, and asked questions when they got stuck. They worked through it methodically and solved it in under 20 minutes each. The second test was emotional regulation. Each hatchling was deliberately frustrated by an impossible task, then given a different task to complete while upset. The traditional hatchlings became aggressive or shut down. Their performance on the follow-up task was poor, their emotions interfering with their thinking. Clare's students recognized their frustration, took breaks to calm down, and asked for help managing their feelings. They completed the follow-up task successfully. But it was the third test that changed everything. The 6 hatchlings were placed together in a large room with a single goal: retrieve a valuable object suspended near the ceiling, too high for any single hatchling to reach. The traditional hatchlings immediately began competing. Each tried to climb alone, getting in each other's way. They saw the others as rivals, not potential helpers. After 30 minutes, they had made no progress and had started fighting among themselves. Claire's students looked at the problem, looked at each other, and started talking. Within minutes, they had formed a living ladder, the largest on the bottom, the smallest on top. Working together, they retrieved the object in under 10 minutes. The council chamber was absolutely silent. "This is not the dragon way," one of the traditionalist elders finally said, but his voice lacked conviction. "The dragon way has kept us strong," another argued. "Why should we change what has worked for centuries?" Clare stepped forward. "Because your way is not working anymore? You told me that dragon birth rates are declining, that young dragons are dying in training at higher rates than ever before, that mental health problems are increasing. Your way produced warriors, yes, but at what cost?" She gestured to the 6 hatchlings. "These children all have the same potential, but only half of them are learning to use it fully. You can have strong warriors who work alone and break under emotional stress. Or you can have strong warriors who work together and understand their own minds. Which do you think will survive longer?" Grimskill looked at Hrothgar. "This is your decision, my king. These are your children who will rule after you. What do you choose?" Hrothgar stood, his massive form casting shadows. Across the chamber, he looked at his 3 children who were watching the proceedings with intelligent, curious eyes. Children who laughed now, who asked questions, who hugged their father good night. "I choose," he began, then stopped. Because at that moment, Tessa ran forward and grabbed onto Claire's leg. Then Sira and Doran joined her, all 3 children forming a protective barrier around their human caretaker. And in a small, clear voice, Tessa said the words that would echo through dragon history. "Can she stay?" The question hung in the air. 3 royal children asking their father and their kingdom to accept that love was not weakness, that the small human who sang them songs and taught them to solve problems together had become as important to them as any dragon mother. Hrothgar looked at his children, then at Clare, then at his council. "That," he said slowly, "is what we must decide." The kingdom split down the middle. In the 3 days since Tessa asked if Clare could stay, dragons had been arguing in the streets, in the council chambers, in private homes. Half the population saw the demonstration results and wanted change. The other half saw tradition being destroyed by an alien who had been on their world for less than a month. Clare stayed in the royal quarters, trying to keep the children's routine normal while the kingdom debated her fate. But even Sira, only 6 months old, could sense the tension. "Why is everyone angry?" she asked during their morning lesson. Clare did not know how to explain politics to a dragon child. Sometimes people are scared of change, even when change might help them. "Are you scared?" Doran asked. "Yes," Clare admitted, "but being scared is okay. It is what you do while scared that matters." The traditionalist faction was not content to wait for the council's decision. Led by an elder named Scythe, they demanded a formal challenge. If Clare truly believed human methods were superior, she should be willing to stake her life on it. The challenge was presented that afternoon. Clare would face a trial by combat, the traditional dragon way of settling disputes. If she won, her methods would be accepted. If she lost, she would be exiled and the children would be raised in the old ways. "This is insane," Hrothgar said when he heard. "She is human, she cannot fight a dragon." "Then she should not have claimed her ways were superior," Scythe said. Coldly, "If she truly believes in what she teaches, she will face the challenge, or admit that human methods are worthless." Clare felt her blood run cold. She was 5 feet tall and weighed maybe 130 pounds. The smallest adult dragon could crush her without effort. But Grimskill raised a hand. "Trial by combat requires both parties to consent. Does the human accept?" Everyone looked at Clare. She could refuse. She could leave right now, return to what remained of human space, forget this ever happened. The smart choice was obvious. Then she looked at Sira, Doran, and Tessa, watching her with complete faith that she would find a solution. I accept, Clare heard herself say, but I request the right to choose the nature of the combat. Scythe laughed, trying to find a way to cheat. No, Clare said. Trying to make it fair, you want to test whether human methods are superior, then test them properly, not with physical strength, but with what humans actually excel at. Grimskill looked interested. Explain. Humans did not survive Earth by being the strongest, Clare said. We survived through intelligence, cooperation, and adaptability. Test me on those. The council conferred. Finally, Grimskill nodded. What do you propose? Clare spent that night designing the challenge. It had to be something that demonstrated human strengths while being fair to dragon capabilities. It had to prove her point about raising children while being something the traditionalists could not dismiss. The next morning, she presented her proposal. A survival scenario, she said. Put me and 3 dragon children raised with human methods in one group. Put Scythe and 3 children raised traditionally in another group. Give us both the same problem to solve under pressure. Whichever group succeeds demonstrates the superior method. What problem? Scythe demanded. A rescue mission, Clare said. Simulate a crisis. A cave collapse, trapped victims, limited time. Each group has to work together to save lives. You get to see traditional dragon strength and hierarchy against human cooperation and creative problem-solving. Scythe considered this. He was confident she could see. He believed dragon methods, dragon strength, dragon discipline would easily win. Agreed. When? Tomorrow, Grimskill said. The entire court will witness. That night Clare could not sleep. She went to check on the children and found Hrothgar already there, watching them sleep. You did not have to accept the challenge, he said quietly. Yes, I did. If I ran, they would have learned that when things get hard, you abandon the people you love. I could not teach them that lesson. Hrothgar was quiet for a long moment. On my world, we have a saying, the fiercest warrior is the one who fights not for glory, but for those who cannot fight for themselves. I thought I understood what that meant. But watching you, a being so small you could fit in my hand, stand before my entire council and accept a challenge that could kill you, all to protect my children's right to be happy. He paused. You have taught me that courage comes in many forms. I am terrified, Clare admitted. That is why it is courage, Hrothgar said. Anyone can be brave when they are not afraid. The next day, the entire kingdom gathered to watch. The scenario had been set up in the old training grounds. A collapsed tunnel system, mechanical victims trapped in debris, a ticking clock measuring oxygen depletion. Each team had basic tools but would have to figure out the rest. Scythe's team went first. 3 dragon children raised in the traditional way, all following Scythe's orders without question. He organized them with military precision. They attacked the problem with raw strength, moving debris through sheer force. They were fast and powerful. They cleared the first chamber in minutes. But when they hit a section where brute force would not work, where the debris was too unstable to simply tear through, they struggled. Scythe ordered different approaches, but the children were trained to follow, not to suggest alternatives. They completed the rescue, but barely made the time limit and caused additional collapses that would have injured real victims. Then it was Clare's turn. She gathered Sira, Doran, and Tessa. Okay, we have trapped people and not much time. What do we know? The children started talking, sharing observations. The structure was unstable. Some paths were blocked. Some debris was too heavy even for dragon children to move safely. So we need to be smart about this, Clare said. Sira, you are the biggest. Doran, you are good with puzzles. Tessa, you are small enough to fit through tight spaces. How do we use our strengths? They planned it out together. Tessa scouted through small gaps to find victims and assess. Damage, Doran figured out which supports to reinforce and which debris to move first. Sira provided the muscle, but only where they had determined it was safe. Clare coordinated, but she also listened when the children had better ideas. When Doran found a safer route, they took it. When Tessa warned about instability, they adjusted. They completed the rescue with time to spare and no additional damage. The crowd was silent as Grimskill compared the results. Both teams had succeeded, but the difference in method was stark. The traditional team was faster initially, someone said. But they caused more damage and barely made the deadline, another argued. The human team was slower to start but more efficient overall, Grimskill observed. And look at the children. Scythe's team is exhausted and injured. Clare's team is tired but unharmed. Scythe stepped forward. This proves nothing, a single test under artificial conditions. But then something unexpected happened. One of the children from Scythe's team, a young dragon named Ridge, spoke up. I wanted to suggest a different approach during the rescue, but I was taught not to question orders. The human children were allowed to think. Why were we not? The question echoed through the crowd. Other traditionally raised children began nodding. Ridge's question changed everything. Within an hour, parents across the kingdom were asking the same thing. If their children could be stronger by learning to think for themselves, why were they being taught only to follow orders? But the traditionalists were not ready to surrender. Scythe stood before the council that evening, his scales dark with anger. This alien has been here for less than a month and has already poisoned our children against their own culture. This is exactly why she must leave. The children are not poisoned, Hrothgar said. They are thinking. Is that not what we want? Warriors who can adapt, who can solve problems, who can work together when needed. We want warriors who are strong, Scythe shot back. Not soft creatures who need encouragement and praise to function. What happens when they face real enemies? When they are alone on a battlefield and there is no one to hold their hand and tell them they did a good job? Clare had been sitting quietly, but now she stood. May I speak? Grimskill nodded. You think emotional support makes children weak, Clare said. But you have it backward. On Earth, we studied this for centuries. Children who grow up with secure attachments, who know they are valued, who understand their own emotions, they become the strongest adults. Not despite the support, but because of it. She walked to the center of the chamber. You want to know what happens when they face real enemies alone? They are less likely to panic because they have learned to manage their emotions. They are more likely to find creative solutions because they have been encouraged to think independently. They are more likely to survive because they know when to ask for help instead of dying alone out of pride. Pretty theories, Scythe said, but Earth is not a dragon world. Your methods work for humans because humans are weak and need such support. Dragons are strong. We do not need coddling. Earth, Clare said quietly, has gravity twice what your world has. Temperatures that swing from 50 below zero to 50 above. Predators that evolved specifically to hunt humans. Diseases that killed millions. Natural disasters that wiped out entire civilizations. And humans, physically weaker than almost every other predator on the planet, survived it all. Not through individual strength, but through cooperation. Through caring for each other. Through building social bonds strong enough to face anything. She looked around at the assembled dragons. You call that weakness. I call it the ultimate survival strategy. Your way produces strong individuals. My way produces strong communities, and communities survive when individuals cannot. The chamber was silent. Then Tessa, who had been watching from the side with her siblings, walked into the center and stood next to Clare. I want to tell you something, Tessa said, her young voice clear in the quiet. Before Clare came, I was scared all the time. I was scared of making mistakes, scared of being too small, scared that because Mother was gone, I did not matter anymore. Sira and Doran walked over to stand with their sister. Clare taught us it is okay to be scared, Sira said. That being scared does not mean being weak. It means being smart enough to know when something is dangerous. She taught us to think, Doran added, not just to obey. And she taught us that asking for help is not shameful. It is how you survive when you cannot do something alone. Tessa looked directly at Scythe. You say she made us soft. But I am not soft. I am loved. There is a difference. The words hit like a physical blow. Several dragons in the crowd looked away, and Clare saw something in their eyes. Grief. Regret. How many of them had raised their own children in the traditional way and wondered if it had to be so hard. Grimskill stood slowly. The council will now vote, but first I have a question for King Hrothgar. What do you believe is best for your children? Hrothgar looked at Sira, Doran, and Tessa. 3 children who had been dying of grief and were now thriving. 3 children who laughed and asked questions and hugged their father good night. I believe, he said slowly, that the purpose of raising children is not to make them into perfect warriors. It is to help them become the best version of themselves. And I have seen my children grow more in these weeks with Clare than in all the months before. He turned to the council. I will not pretend to understand all of human psychology. I will not claim their methods are perfect. But I know what I have seen. My children are happy. They are learning. They are becoming strong in ways I did not know were possible. If that is what human methods produce, then perhaps we have something to learn from this small, soft species that survived one of the harshest worlds in known space. The vote was not unanimous. Some dragons could not let go of centuries of tradition. But when the votes were counted, the decision was clear. Clare could stay, not as a temporary caretaker, but as a recognized royal guardian. More than that, her methods would be studied, tested, and potentially integrated into dragon education. It was not everything. Some families would continue the old ways, and there would be resistance for years to come. But it was a beginning. That night, after the crowds had dispersed and the council had adjourned, Clare sat in the royal quarters with 3 dragon children curled around her. They were too big to fit in her lap anymore, but they tried anyway. Are you staying forever? Tessa asked sleepily. Clare looked at Hrothgar, who was watching from the doorway. He nodded slightly. Yes, Clare said, I am staying. Good, Tessa murmured, because we need you. I need you too, Clare whispered. Later, when the children were asleep, Hrothgar came to sit beside her. For a long moment they sat in comfortable silence, watching the 3 young dragons breathe. They asked if you could stay, Hrothgar said finally. And the kingdom answered, but I have not asked what you want. This is not your world. These are not your people. You had a life before you crashed here. Do you truly want to give that up? Clare thought about her old life, her research, her colleagues, her career. All of it felt distant now, like it had happened to someone else. I was studying extreme life forms, she said. Trying to understand how species adapt to impossible conditions. I thought I would find the answer in biology, in physical adaptations. But you know what? The real answer was right here. She gestured to the sleeping children. Humans survived Earth by forming bonds, by caring for each other, by making family out of whoever was willing to fight for the same things you fought for. These children are not my species, but they are my family, and that matters more than biology. Hrothgar was quiet for a moment. Then he did something Clare had never seen a dragon do. He lowered his massive head until it was level with hers, a gesture of equality and respect. Then welcome home, Clare, and thank you for saving more than just my children, for helping us remember that strength without compassion is just cruelty. Clare smiled. On Earth we have a saying, it takes a village to raise a child. I think it might take a kingdom to change a culture, but we have made a start. Outside, the twin moons of the dragon world rose over the palace. Inside, 3 dragon children slept peacefully, watched over by a human who had traveled across the stars and found family in the most unexpected place. The kingdom had asked if she could stay, and in staying, she would help build a future where strength and kindness were not opposites, but 2 parts of the same foundation, where children could be both warriors and loved, where tradition could evolve without being destroyed. It would not be easy. Change never was. But as Clare sat there, surrounded by sleeping dragons who had chosen to love her, she thought that maybe, just maybe, the hardest things were worth doing. Because in the end, that was the most human lesson of all.